Hello everyone, my name is Anna and I welcome you guys back to another English Torah video here on the channel of Young Pilgrims. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing chapters 22 to 25 of the book of Numbers. And the title for today is One More Challenge, the Doctrine of Balaam. And in these chapters, we're going to be reading about this person named Balaam, who had a really great fame for all the type of spells that he would do for the people. And because of this fame that he had, it is why we're going to read that the king of Moab, the king Balak, called him so he can curse the people of Israel, since he had a great fear towards them. But we're going to be reading how the Eternal doesn't let Balaam curse the people of Israel, but either bless them, because the Creator used Balaam to utter his words through the holy breath. With this short introduction, now we're going to start off with chapter 22, verses 1 to 8, where we can read that after everything that the Eternal had done through the people of Israel towards the Amorites, now the king of Moab, who was named in that time Balak, he saw that the people of Israel were camping around his kingdom. And because of this, it is why now he had been overcome by fear. And because of that fear, it is why we can read that he decided to call this man named Balaam, who was the son of Beor. In these verses, it narrates that Balaam had a great fame for the spells that he had performed towards the other people. And not only that, but he was also known to be a soothsayer, and he was also dedicated to divination. With this great fame, it is why King Balak calls for him so he can curse the people of Israel, and therefore his plan was that once the people of Israel were cursed, now he was going to be able to defeat Israel in the war and drive them away from the land. But in these verses, something that we can clearly see is that the Eternal, obviously he was not going to allow this to happen, because not only was it not an order that came from the Eternal, but also because, as we know, the Eternal was the one who liberated the people of Israel from Egypt, from all the slavery that they were in, and he liberated them. So he was now going to fulfill his promise that he had given to Abraham and his descendants about giving them the promised land. So just as I was saying, this was something that obviously the Eternal wasn't going to let it happen, because everything that the people of Israel were doing was because the Eternal was giving them the orders of what they were going to do with the other nations. From verses 9 to 21, we can read that Balak sent his elders and the elders of Midian to go get Balaam and bring him towards him. But we can read that once these elders got to Balaam's place, and once they told everything that Balak wanted Balaam to do for him, we can read that Balaam refuses to go with them. The reason why he had refused to go with him was because Balaam had consulted the offer that these elders had given to Balaam. And when he consulted this with the Creator told him not to go, because the people of Israel had already been blessed. So because of this, it is why Balaam tells the elders to go back to their house or go back to their country and go tell the king that he was not going to come. In these verses, it narrates that the elders go back to the king and tell him that he didn't want to come, that he refused. But since we can see that Balak was desperate for Balaam to curse the people of Israel because he was in a fear, so we can see that Balak once again sends his people, but this time it wasn't the elders, it was more important people, which were his princess, to get Balaam. And this time, not only did he send the people, but he also told his people to tell Balaam that whatever Balaam wants, the king was going to give it to him, as long as he cursed the people of Israel. But once again, Balaam, hearing this offer, he doesn't take a decision right away, but either consults it with the Eternal, and this time the Eternal approved of him going to Moab, but only under the condition that Balaam was only going to do and was only going to say what the Father was going to tell him, or was going to tell him. And in this, we can see how Balaam, even though he wasn't part of the people of Israel, however, he did have a communication with the Eternal, and he did understand that he couldn't act and do things. He couldn't act right away without consulting it with the Father. And this is something interesting that I noticed within these verses. And from verses 22 to 41, we can read that Balaam, having the Eternal's approval, he gets on his donkey and rides it towards the kingdom of Balak. But this time, the angel of the Eternal was an adversary towards Balaam. And I say this because within these verses, we can read that the angel of the Eternal appeared to the donkey 3 times, which caused the donkey to go into the field. And because of what the donkey had done, this caused the anger of Balaam to awaken and hit his donkey so it can go back into the road and towards the men of the king Balak, in order so he can go to Moab. But then the Eternal opened the mouth of the donkey and started talking to Balaam, and then the Eternal made Balaam open his eyes and see the angel with his sword that the donkey had seen previously. And Balaam seeing the angel, that is where the angel started saying to Balaam that why is it that he hit the donkey? That if it wasn't because of the donkey, then he would have been dead by now, and not the donkey. In this situation that we can read within these verses, we can see that the Father can talk to whoever he wants. And well, in this case, Balaam was not the Eternal's faithful servant, because as we can see, he would also Balaam would do different types of spells towards other people. And however, we can read here that Balaam was used as an instrument to test the people of Israel. And we're going to be seeing in the next chapters how the people of Israel, they were comfortable in the place that they were, and they were not looking out for their surroundings, and because of that, it is why they fall into transgression. In these verses, we can see that the angel told him to go to Balak, but only to speak what he was told. And something for me that reading these verses, for me it was amazing to see how nobody can do evil to the people of Israel if the Eternal has not permitted it. And this is because everyone and everything is submitted to the authority of the Almighty. At the end of this chapter, we can see that the Eternal forbade Balaam to curse the people of Israel, and he makes it clear that Israel was blessed and therefore it couldn't be cursed. And in these verses of these chapters, it takes us to reflect that all of those who have returned to the Father through Yeshua to live obviously a life according to his will, keeping his instructions with the correct interpretation that the Messiah has given us in his testimony, then now once we do all of this, then now we have the blessing of being made children of Elohim, and obviously he shares that promise of eternal life towards his faithful servants. Now we're going to continue with chapter 23, verses 1 to 6, where we're going to now start seeing that Balak is not confirmed with what Balaam has said, that the people of Israel cannot be cursed because they had already been blessed. And Balak now makes Balaam do a type of sacrifice so that the Creator can allow them to continue with the curse that Balak wanted Balaam to do. And verses 1 to 6 of chapter 23 say, Balaam said to Balak, "Build me 7 altars here, prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me to sacrifice." Balak did just as Balaam said. The two of them offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Then Balaam said to Balak, "Stay here beside your offering. I will go and try to find out what the Eternal wants me to do. Maybe he'll come and meet with me. Then I'll tell you what he says to me." So Balaam went off to a bare hilltop. Elohim met with him there. Balaam said, "I've prepared 7 altars. On each altar I've offered a bull and a ram." The Eternal put a message on Balaam's mouth. The Eternal said, "Go back to Balak. Give him my message." Verse 6. So Balaam went back to him. He found Balak standing beside his offering, and all the Moabite officials were with him. In these verses, we can see this entire process that was going on with these sacrifices that Balaam was doing, so the Eternal could approve of the curse that they were going to do. And we can read in the beginning of these verses that the king of Moab takes Balaam to Bamoth Baal, where part of the people of Israel could be seen. And being in that place, in the verses narrate that Balak built for Balaam 7 altars to offer a sacrifice, 1 calf and 1 ram on each altar. All this in order to approach the Creator seeking an answer, since everything was ready for the sacrifices. And we can read that Balaam went to a private place to seek the Eternal and do what the Eternal was now going to command him. But when he returned from that place, he returned back to Balak and all the princesses that were there. In response before them, we can read that Balak began to speak what the Creator put in his mouth. And those words were a blessing and not a curse for the people or towards the people of Israel. And in verses 7 to 10, we can read the words that the Father put in Balaam's mouth. And the words say this: "Then Balaam spoke the message he had received from Elohim. He said, 'Balak brought me from the land of Aram. The king of Moab sent for me from the mountains in the east. Come,' he said, 'put a curse on Jacob's people for me. Come, speak against Israel.'" Verse 8. "But how can I put a curse on people Elohim hasn't cursed? How can I speak against the people that Elohim hasn't spoken against?" Verse 9. "I see them from the rocky peaks. I view them from the hills. I see a group of people who live by themselves. They don't consider themselves to be one of the nations. Jacob's people are like the dust of the earth. Can dust be counted? Who can count even a quarter of the Israelites? Let me die as godly people die. Let my death be like theirs." And after all these words that Balaam said, because the Eternal put in his mouth, it is evident that Balak's reaction was not going to be good towards Balaam's words, since let's remember, he did call Balaam to curse the people and not to bless them, something that Balaam had not done in this situation. We can read that Balaam blessed the people of Israel and not cursed them. And this is why, since Balak was not confirmed, he was not pleased with what Balaam had said. So now we're going to be reading in the next verses of this chapter that Balak once again attempts to curse Israel by taking Balaam to another place, or in this case to a field called Sophim. And he moved him to another place so he can change his mind, since now he was not just seeing the people of Israel, like that part of the people of Israel, but only a small part of them. And Balaam being in this place, once again, the whole process repeats itself. They build altars, they offer sacrifices to the Creator, but the response does not change. And to make it clear to the king of Moab and the princes who were there with him in that field, Balaam once again begins to speak to them according to the words that the Creator put in his mouth. And these words we can read in verses 18 to 23, which say, Then Balaam spoke the message he had received from Elohim. He said, Balak, rise up and listen. Son of Zippor, hear me. Elohim isn't a human. He can't lie. He isn't a human being. He doesn't change his mind. He speaks and then he acts. He makes a promise and then he keeps it. He has commanded me to bless Israel. He has given them his blessing, and I can't change it. Verse 21, I don't see any trouble coming on the people of Jacob. I don't see any suffering in Israel. The Eternal, their Elohim, is with them. The shout of the king is among them. Elohim brought them out of Egypt. They are as strong as a wild ox. Verse 23, there isn't any magic that can hurt the people of Jacob. No one can use magic words to harm Israel. Here is what will be said about the people of Israel. In these words that Balaam says, blessing the people of Israel, not only does Balaam make it clear that he was not going to curse the people of Israel because the Eternal was not going to allow it, but also in the verses more forward, we're going to be reading that Balaam says that the people of Israel was going to be an instrument of the Creator to send judgment to those in the nations. Now, it is very important for us to know that just because the people of Israel were going to give judgment to the nations because the Eternal was going to order them to do that, that does not mean that the people of Israel had never sinned. But because in comparison to the other nations, all of them had reached their limit in perversion and iniquity. And because of that, it is why the Eternal told Balaam to tell Balak that the people of Israel were going to bring judgment and that they were as wild as they were strong as a wild ox. And because of that, it is why no one can hurt the people of Israel if it wasn't because, or no one can hurt the people of Israel, the people of Jacob, if the Eternal had not ordered that to happen. From verses 23 and 24, Balaam continues to say what the Father put in his mouth, so he can say it to Balak, and he continues saying, here is what will be said about Israel. People will say, see what Elohim has done. The Israelites are going to wake up like a female lion. They are going to get up like a male lion. They are like a lion that won't rest until it eats what it has caught. They are like a lion who won't rest until it drinks the blood of what it has killed. This trial that we can read that was going to take place obviously had a reason why the Eternal was going to order this judgment or this trial. And since, let's remember that it wasn't just because the people of Israel had evil in them, but it was mainly because the nations were really corrupted in that time. For example, if we remember in the previous chapters that we have read, there existed giants who were genetically contaminated, and therefore this is one of the reasons that we can see why the Eternal, or why it was necessary that the Eternal commanded the people of Israel to put an end to the lineage of these fallen beings. Also, the Eternal was going to allow all of this judgment to happen because, let's remember, the Eternal was fulfilling his promise that he had done to Abraham and his descendants about the promised land. And let's remember that all of these nations, these corrupted nations, were there in the promised land that the Eternal had and was going to be giving it to the people of Israel. And reading everything that we can see in these verses about how Balak wants to, and he tries to times to curse the people of Israel so he can defeat them in the war, and how the Eternal doesn't allow this to happen but blesses the people of Israel through Balaam, and how Balaam starts speaking all of these blessings towards the people of Israel that the Eternal had put in his mouth. Reading all of this situation, we can see and we can realize that it is important to know that nowadays, through the Messiah, we are a part of the people of Israel who not only claim to be Israel, but also demonstrated with our actions and our deeds of obedience. And in this way, it is how the Eternal or the Creator, it is not ashamed to call himself our Elohim, and he really obtains the blessing, which is obviously, as we have already studied, it is not an earthly blessing, but an inheritance in heaven through a faith that with works. And where obviously in that celestial place there is no violence and there is no bloodshed, how it was in that time with the people of Israel. Now continuing with chapter 24 verses 1 to 4, we can read that Balak once again is not satisfied with the Creator's response, and for the third time he attempts once again to curse Israel. This time he takes Balaam to another place called the summit of Peor, where they repeat the same procedure. They build 7 altars, and in each altar they offer 1 calf and 1 ram. However, unlike the 2 previous occasions, this time Balaam did not go in search for an answer from the Creator, but inspired by the Creator and being in a place where his view was towards the desert and not towards the people of Israel, he began to speak not only words of blessing but also prophecy that was based on the promise that the Eternal had made towards Abraham and his descendants. And these blessings and this prophecy that Balaam starts to speak, we can read it in the next verses, from verses 5 to 9, that say, "People of Jacob, your tents are very beautiful, Israel. The places where you live are very beautiful. They spread out like valleys. They are like gardens beside a river. They are like aloes the Eternal has planted. They are like cedar trees beside a stream. Their water buckets will run over. Their seeds will have plenty of water. Their king will be greater than the king Agag. Their kingdom will be honored." Verse 8, "Elohim brought them out of Egypt. They are as strong as a wild ox. They destroy nations at war with them. They break their bones in pieces. They wound them with their arrows." Verse 9, "Like a male lion, they lie down and sleep. They are like a female lion. Who dares to wake them up? May those who bless you be blessed. May those who curse you be cursed." Once again, the king Balak, hearing this blessing that came from the mouth of Balaam instead of a curse, obviously Balak's reaction towards these words, it was not pleasant, and this caused the king to clap his hands, but not in demonstration of joy, but in demonstration of anger. Since with this, it was already 3 times that he did not curse the people of Israel, but blessed them. But Balaam not only made it clear to him who he was subject to, because let's remember that although if Balaam wanted to curse the people of Israel in exchange of the prophet or the offers that the king Balak had offered him, the Creator had set limits for Balaam that he could not cross, and Balaam knew this. So this is why the king Balak then tells Balaam to go home, because he was not satisfied. But Balaam, before leaving this place, he warns the king of Moab what the people of Israel were going to do with the nations. And we can read in detail everything that was going to happen with the nations and the people of Israel. And this we can read it in verses 17 to 24. Throughout this chapter 24, we can realize that the king of Moab understood that it wasn't just a physical fight that was going to happen, but it was also a spiritual one. And for that reason, it is why during the wars that the people of Israel had with the other nations, for that reason, it is why it was very important that the Levites and the great minister went with the people of the army of the people of Israel. And as we all know, when they would go to wars, they would take the Levites and the great minister would take the Ark of the Covenant, where inside there it would be the divine presence and the sacred instruments. Understanding all of this, although yes, currently nowadays our enemy is not physical, but we learn in these verses that the Creator is in control of everything. And if we remain in obedience to Him, then those spiritual struggles that we get to have in our days, we will be able to win them by doing good with the spiritual armor. And this is what in the New Testament Paul refers to when he says that we do not fight against flesh or blood, but against powers and rulers of darkness. After all of this that happened in these 3 chapters, that Balak wanted to curse the people of Israel but couldn't, we can read at the end of these verses of this chapter 24 that Balaam apparently continued or went his way back home, but due to the events that are going to be described in the next chapter, it is why we're going to see that it wasn't that wasn't the case. Balaam didn't continue his way home. Continuing with the last chapter of today's video, chapter 25 verses 1 to 5 say, Israel was staying in Shittim. The men of Israel began to commit sexual sins with the women of Moab. The women invited the men to feasts and did sacrifices to honor their gods. The people ate the sacrifices and bowed down in front of the statues of those gods. So Israel joined in worshiping the god named Baal that was worshipped at Peor. The Eternal became very angry with Israel. The Eternal said to Moses, Take all the leaders of these people, kill them. Put their dead bodies out in the open. I want to see you do it in the middle of the day. Then I will not be angry with Israel. Verse 5. So Moses spoke to Israel's judges. He said, Some of your people have joined in worshiping the god named Baal, that is worshipped at Peor. Each of you must kill the people in your tribe who have done this. In these verses, we can read that apparently the people of Israel became confident with their situation that they were in. They believed that they were completely assured, and therefore they allowed themselves to be carried away by their carnality. Their hearts became attached to the Midianites woman, and they started serving their idols. And this took them to serve the idols and the gods of these people. This shows us that as believers, it is important for us to watch and pray at all times. Because just as Yeshua said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The fact that we have this human weakness should not be an excuse to sin. On the contrary, having this knowledge should be an initiative to strive even harder every day to take care of all our senses, consecrating ourselves to the Creator and constantly nourishing ourselves with the true vine that is Yeshua, in order to not fall into a transgression. And it is very important for us not to forget that through the Ruach of the Eternal that dwells in us, we can win these battles that we're going to have if we remain firm in the faith. And I say this because in these verses, due to the transgression that the people of Israel were committing, these sexual transgressions, the wrath of the Eternal was greatly inflamed, which is why the people of Israel suffered a severe judgment from the Creator. And obviously it was a judgment that did not bring happiness. It was a judgment that brings sadness, and this judgment also brought death within the people of Israel. After everything that the Eternal had done for the people of Israel, taking them out of Egypt, having them win their wars that they had towards the nations, giving them manna in the desert, after all of this gratefulness that the Eternal had towards the people of Israel, the people of Israel didn't think it twice. They fell into idolatry, into sexual transgression. They forgot everything that the Creator had done for them, and this was because of their human nature. They let themselves be carried away by their emotions. And as we know, when the emotions of the person dominates them, it is very easy for us as human beings to fall into transgression. As believers, we must be guided only by the holy breath of the eternal, having dominion over our emotions, so that we analyze every decision that we are going to make, everything that we're going to say, see, listen, everything. So that in that way we don't fall and start living a way in a way that is not pleasing towards the eternal. Something that the people of Israel, because of their blindness and because they were not ungrateful and they were not they got carried away by their carnality, they started living a life that was not pleasing to the Creator, and because of that, it is why they had to suffer the consequences, the judgment that the eternal was now going to bring. In verse 6, we are going to read about a man and a Midianite woman who did something unpleasant towards the people of Israel and towards the eternal. And the verse says, "Then a Israelite man brought into the camp a Midianite woman. He did it right in front of the eyes of Moshe or Moses and the whole community of Israel. They were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting." In these verses, we can see this unpleasing act that this man and this woman did in front of the people of Israel and in front of Moses. We can see that this man, we read that this man, it shows us a great lack of fear that he had towards the eternal, since we can see or we can read that he was not interested, he did not care about the consequences that this deviation was going to cause, that this act of sin was going to cause him. He only wanted to please his flesh. He crossed not only the authority of the eternal, but also the authority of Moshe. Nowadays, we can see the same attitude within the world, even though they know that there will be a judgment towards their attitude that they have, towards their acts. But, however, the people that are taken away by their carnality, they still practice all kinds of ambitions, of transgressions, without fear of Elohim and the judgment that he can bring. As believers, we must keep in mind that we must guard our salvation with fear and trembling, having total reverence of the Creator every day of our lives and submitting to his will and obeying his word. Something that the people of Israel didn't do, and because of that, they had to suffer the consequences. And us having their testimony and the testimony of other people who also lacked in that aspect, it's testimony for us so we can learn from them and not act like them. From verses 7 to 9, it says, "Phinehas was a priest. He was the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron. When Phinehas saw what had happened, he left the people. He took a spear in his hand. He followed the man into the tent. Phinehas struck the spear through the man and into the woman's stomach. Then the Eternal stopped the plague against the Israelites, but the plague had already killed 24,000 people of the people of Israel." In these verses, we can read that Phinehas is presented to us. And just as we can read in these verses, he was a Levite. He was from the Levite tribe, and his father was Eleazar, son of Aaron, who was the great minister. And in these verses, we can read that Phinehas, upon seeing all this transgression that was happening, or that was being committed, especially with this Israelite woman and this this Israelite man and this Midianite woman, Phinehas was tired of all of this, and upon seeing that this plague had been killing a lot of Israelites, he grabbed and struck the spear through the man and into the woman's stomach. he didn't think twice to end this type of iniquity. He saw this and he acted right away. And if we read this without knowing the context of what was happening, it can be seemed very severe, very harsh what Phinehas had done. But once we understand everything of what was happening, all of these transgression, how the people of Israel were passing the authority of the Eternal, then that is when we can realize that it was very necessary to put an end to this transgression. And this is something that Phinehas had understood. And he realized the lack of fear that this man and that this man had, and that his attitude would continue to lead the people of Israel to continue with these transgressions and just corrupt the people of Israel. And that is why for this reason, it is why Phinehas did not allow this act to go unpunished. He was radical when it came to lancing the carnality of these people. And from this attitude that Phinehas had, we can learn how important it is for all the disciples of the Messiah to transcend our carnality. That is, to die to ourselves and do it with a sharp sword that is the word of the Eternal. The Eternal, seeing this attitude that Phinehas had, he was pleased because Phinehas showed great zeal for his Creator. His actions exalted the name of the Creator, and therefore it is why the Creator stopped the plague. And because of this, it is why the Father established a pact of peace with Phinehas and his descendants. In this attitude that Phinehas had, it shows us a shadow of the work of the Messiah, Yeshua, who also had a great zeal for the Father, and his work pierces the sin that is in our lives, since it puts to death the old man in us, and through it establishes a peace pact between the Eternal and us. At the end of these verses of this chapter 25, we can read that the Father orders the people of Israel to treat that entire nation as their enemy. And this they will do it by killing everyone and everything that was there. So in that way, when the people of Israel would take that place to start living there, because as remember, that place was the promised land, when they would start living in that place, there wouldn't be any more people who would idolize their pagan gods, and therefore the people of Israel was not going to be a corrupted community. But obviously this is something that the people of Israel did not obey, and later on in the next chapters we're going to be seeing how the people of Israel have had to suffer the consequences of their actions. And in all of this, it shows us that, number one, to have a great zeal for the Father as believers, to live a life that is pleasing to the Creator according to what His commandments say, according to what the testimony of our Yeshua, the Messiah, tells us to live our life like. Also, putting to death our carnality. So in that way, we don't fall into transgression and we don't live a life that isn't pleasing to the Creator. And well, that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for your time, and we will see each other in the next time, the Father willing.